Hi everyone, this is APO Sports and we're back with another video. And in this one, we're gonna talk about what makes a good coach. So we've been talking about Christie Sides a lot. I feel like every video that I do, I talk about Christie Sides and coaching and lineups and rotations and all kinds of different aspects of what makes up a coach. So in this one, we're going to do a little bit of exploring. We're going to be talking specifically about two different coaches who have cemented themselves as one of the best coaches ever in the history of basketball. We're going to explore them two, we're going to explore the two of them. What makes them good? What makes them not so good? And how we're going to tie this back to Christie Sides and how we're going to tie this back to the Indiana Fever. And that's kind of the exercise that we're going to be doing today. I have a history major, so I'm going to be sprinkling in a little bit of history and hope that, I don't know, maybe you enjoy that or you get to learn a little bit about how I'm going to be breaking down and how I'm going to be doing this analysis. So, the first thing what I consider is so I put myself in the shoes of Lynn Dunn, or I put myself in the shoes of the general manager of the Indiana Fever. And okay, so right now I have a coach, but say I didn't have a coach. Say that I had a coaching vacancy and I have the roster as it is currently constructed. So and I have the roster as it's currently constructed. What am I essentially looking for? Who should I be looking for? And how does this search comes to be? So so I look at two individuals. I look at Phil Jackson and I look at Gregg Popovich. And I look at their capabilities and their coaching qualities. And then I take it from there. So just a little bit of data so that we can kind of see who we're talking about here and the impact that these individuals have had. I'm going to add one more, although I'm not going to be discussing this other coach, but I'm going to add one more. I'm going to add Pat Riley to the mix. So it's going to be so between Gregg Popovich, Phil Jackson, and Pat Riley and their disciples, they've all won in the last 33 years 76% of all NBA titles. Think about that. So there's been, and this is talking about the last 33 years, since 1991 until today, there has been 33 NBA titles. Out of those 33 NBA titles, 25 of them have either been won by Phil Jackson, Gregg Popovich, Pat Riley, or one of their students, disciples, or people that learned under their leadership. And what we're talking about when we're talking about that is Steve Kerr. So Phil Jackson has 10 titles. Uh, Gregg Popovich has 5 titles. Pat Riley has a bunch of titles, but he only won one in this time period that I'm actually talking about. But then Steve Kerr has 4 titles. And Steve Kerr, interestingly enough, is a disciple of both Phil Jackson and Gregg Popovich because he won titles as a player with both of those coaches. And then we get to the Phil Jackson's disciples haven't really done other than Steve Kerr. You know, as far as the coaches haven't really done that much damage. But then Pat Riley with Eric Spoelstra winning 2 titles by himself. So again, 25 out of the 33. And I will add Becky Hammon, who's currently the coach of the Las Vegas Aces. The first time that she's ever been a head coach. She's only been a head coach twice. Guess how many titles she's won? 2 seasons as head coach, the only 2 seasons she's ever been a head coach. She's won both WNBA titles. So it is pretty clear at this point that that is the standard of coaching for winning basketball games. That is an insane amount of success within just 3 individuals and their coaching tree. It's just insane. So, if you're looking to win championships, you have to either look at those people or you have to look at people who are students of their game or understand their game or understand them, right? That's who you want. So, we're going to evaluate here because I would evaluate Pat Riley as well, but Pat Riley is very similar to Phil Jackson as far as their coaching approach and how they manage certain things. So we're going to stick to Phil Jackson and Gregg Popovich. And I want to talk about Phil Jackson first. So let's talk about Phil Jackson first and what makes him a good coach. So Phil Jackson has a tremendous eye for talent management. He knows the roster that he has constructed. He knows what they're good at, and he's good putting them in situations to be successful. That's really the best thing that Phil Jackson brings to the table, in addition to managing egos. So Phil Jackson is a great coach of already super talented individuals who just need a coach who knows exactly when to step in and when to let them be, right? Not to do too much, to let them figure it out, to empower them to be great, and to take it from there. That's pretty much Phil Jackson in a nutshell. If you give Phil Jackson a team of kind of underperforming, raw talent, people that need to be developed and mentored and coached and inspired, he's not going to do that. That team is not going to be successful at all whatsoever, which is what brings me to Gregg Popovich, Gregg Popovich as a coach, which he's everything that Phil Jackson is not good at, Gregg Popovich is good at. So he's great at finding diamonds in the rough, those who are not, who were not players who were not drafted, players who were drafted later in the draft, players who have gotten over themselves, who are no ego issues at all. They understand that here the boss and the mentor and the coach, whoever has the last word, is always going to be Gregg Popovich. He's great with those and with that environment, right? They drafted Tony Parker late in the first round, and he pretty much developed Tony Parker into what Tony Parker became, a Hall of Famer. He drafted Manu Ginobili somewhere in the second round. Developed Ginobili into what Ginobili became. Drafted Kawhi Leonard 15th on the draft. That was pretty high, but not many people were tracking Kawhi Leonard. They were like, oh, okay, Kawhi Leonard, whatever. And then Gregg Popovich developed him into what it became. Tim Duncan. And I'm going to get into Tim Duncan a little bit too. Yes, he was super talented. Yes, he was a first overall pick. But I don't think that Tim Duncan would have been the player that he was, or as successful as he was, if he was not playing for Gregg Popovich, right? Gregg Popovich was able to coach, was able to get on his face. Like, can you imagine Phil Jackson ever yelling at Michael Jordan? No, that wasn't going to happen. So Gregg Popovich needs the kind of players who have kind of gotten over themselves. But here's what I can tell you right now, is that if you flip-flop them, and if you put Phil Jackson and give Phil Jackson the team that Gregg Popovich won championships with, that team would not have won championships. That team would not have been successful. If you put Gregg Popovich and you plug him in the 1990s Chicago Bulls, that team would have had crazy amounts of issues, would not have been successful. I don't know how many titles they win because you still have Michael Jordan, but Gregg Popovich has an inability to manage high egos and already crazy talented individuals, and that is evidenced by Gregg Popovich coaching the Olympic team. So the Team USA. I don't know if he coached in the Olympics, but he did coach Team USA in a World Championship. I think this was back in I want to say 2022. I can't remember the championships. I will have to double check. But I think they finished either third, or actually they probably didn't even earn any medals. They ended like fifth or sixth, right? They were like, oh, with Gregg Popovich, you're going to be successful. No, that's not necessarily the case. He's not that good at managing already talented, extremely talented people who come in with big egos. That's not what he does. But he can develop and coach people they're not expected to be great, and he will develop them. And then I also want to make some comparisons, and this is where the history is going to come in, is that I compare Phil Jackson to George Washington, so the United States first president. Because the United States first president, George Washington, he was really good at the same things that Phil Jackson was good at. And that was, talent management. Already, he was great with already talented individuals. So he was able to identify, whoa, that person is crazy talented. I want them on my team. And then he was able to have an eye for, okay, what is this person really good at? Where can I put them? Okay, they're really good with this aspect. Let me place them there. You're really good with this other thing. Let me place you there, right? To this day, in US politics and government, the best cabinet ever assembled, ever. We're talking about, and I mean, this is the very first one back in, 1790, 1791. Whenever this first happened, it was tremendous, and all because of George Washington knowing exactly who to put where, right? He put Alexander Hamilton. He said, Alexander Hamilton, you're pretty great. You're good with numbers. You're good with finances. You have a chip on your shoulder. I want you as my Secretary of Treasury. All right, Thomas Jefferson, you're good with people. You're charismatic. People know you around the world. You also have a chip on your shoulder. I want you as my Secretary of State. Henry Knox, you're good with military, discipline, order, all of these things. I want you as my Secretary of War. That's just how insanely gifted George Washington was in being able to identify that talent and then manage those egos, because all of them had crazy amount of egos. Alexander Hamilton did, Thomas Jefferson did, James Madison did, Henry Knox. All of these people had crazy amounts of egos, right? I mean, I just come in from winning the war, establishing a whole new country, like that was an insane amount of talent management done by George Washington. And that is where Jackson and Washington are pretty similar. Now let's go to the Gregg Popovich. Who am I going to compare Gregg Popovich, who, by the way, if you didn't know, was raised in Indiana. So I'm going to compare him with Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln was raised in Indiana. Which is, I don't know, that's just a crazy coincidence that now I'm just covering the Indiana fever, and these two coaches that I'm talking, I mean, that's two coaches, these two leaders that I'm talking about were raised there, because I think Gregg Popovich was born and raised there, and Abraham Lincoln was just raised there. But yeah, so similarities between Popovich and Abraham Lincoln is that Lincoln was also someone who wanted to mentor, someone who wanted to be involved to not micromanage, but he wanted to be involved. He wanted to be on the lines. He wanted to find that diamond in the rough type thing. That's where he found Grant and where he found Sherman, right? But he wasn't good at knowing where to place individuals and when, right? That's why he went through so many generals during the war. That's why the Civil War took 4 years instead of 3 months. It's because he could not really figure out, kind of like how Christie Sides is struggling to find the right rotations in the right lineups, because they just don't have the brain to figure out those type of combinations. They can try to develop someone, and eventually they got to the right decision. And this is not a knock on Abraham Lincoln, right? Because we all can recognize that he was one of the best U.S. presidents that we've had. But we also have to, we have to note that he struggled as a commander in chief in being able to find the individuals that were best suited for those roles in those high positions as generals making decisions on the ground. I'm telling you right now, if it would have been Washington instead of Lincoln in the Civil War, that would have lasted 6 months at the most. Instead, it dragged for 4 years because of the incompetence of the generals and Abraham Lincoln's inability to identify who he needed to place in those positions. Once he found his generals, which again were Grant and Sherman, that he was able to better coach them to do kind of what he was guiding them to do, because he had a mind for it, and he kind of knew what it was done. It was his generals were hesitating and are not completely following orders, but it was a struggle to find the people that he needed to find to take over, right? So that's where I compare Popovich and Lincoln, in that they're more mentors, they're more, you know, in your face. They're more about developing talent rather than Jackson and Washington, who are more about give me already talented individuals and I can, better manage them. So that's essentially what we have. But Jackson and Washington also had a great mind for what needed to be done, right? It's not just, people think that just because you have great players or great workers, if you're a leader or supervisor, if you have great workers, that it's easy to lead them. It's not. It's not. It can go sideways really fast. If you have people who are, clashing and you're being toxic with one another, then they want to do it all themselves. Like, it's not easy to manage egos, right? I mean, Jackson even was challenged by Kobe and by Shaq and Kobe, extremely challenged by those two, right? Because there was a point, and actually he wasn't even able to figure it out, right? They ended up trading Shaq away because it just bumped heads. So I'm telling you, it's not just because you have talent doesn't mean that they're easy to coach or easy to manage. And he was able to be successful in the Bulls that entire time. But with the Lakers, he still won, 3 titles with the Lakers, which was good. Or he won 5 titles with the Lakers, but I mean 3 with the Shaq Kobe combination. Um, so that was kind of the issue. The other thing that Phil Jackson brings into the table, like if you look at both of these individuals' coaching staffs, right? If you looked at Phil Jackson's coaching staff, and if you looked at Gregg Popovich coaching staff, it also gives you a glimpse at their 2 different styles. If you look at Gregg Popovich coaching staff, he is going to be the basketball mind. He's going to be the most knowledgeable individual in that coaching staff. So what he wants, what it seems like he gets in his assistant coaches, is people that he can develop and grow to one day, take over and to one day be coaches and things like that. That's what he does, right? So I mean, they're mostly young coaches or young people who just ended up their playing careers, and now he has them as assistant coaches and he grows them, and then boom, he starts to farm coaches and deploying them to different teams. If you looked at Phil Jackson's coaching staff, the staff that he had were smarter than him, right? When it came to basketball, they knew more basketball. They have more of basketball mind than Phil Jackson did. So he wanted to surround himself with people that knew about the subject more than he did. That's why he had Tex Winters with him. Tex Winters was a crazy basketball mind, the one who created the triangle offense. That was Tex Winters. So he was there from 19 whenever Phil Jackson took over the Bulls, won 6 titles with the Chicago Bulls, and then brought him to the Lakers and also won all those titles with the Lakers, with Tex Winters being his lead assistant coach. So it's a very different in approach, because Phil Jackson was able to identify who has a great basketball mind and who doesn't. He's able to identify out of his players. If Michael Jordan went to his office, knock knock, hey Phil, I want to talk to you, and Phil like, all right, come on, Mike, what's up? And Mike said, hey, I don't know. I don't think I'm playing really well with Steve Kerr during these minutes. I think he actually should play these other minutes or whatever, you know what I mean? Or in these situations, I don't want Steve Kerr in. I want him over here taking these type of shots. Phil Jackson would be smart enough to know whether what Michael Jordan is saying is bullshit or has some merit to it. It takes a certain mind to know whether that's bullshit or not. A lot of coaches don't know. And I think that's exactly what's happening with Christie Sides, is that I don't think she knows. So maybe she asked someone, or if it's someone young, maybe someone young saying that, maybe she won't trust it. If it's someone that has, you know, more experience in basketball, who in her mind should have more basketball knowledge, she's probably going to listen to them before she listens to someone young who in her mind doesn't have the basketball experience, but is actually speaking facts and saying the truth, and actually watching it as it develops. So again, if it's Christie Sides and it's Kaylin Clark approaching Sides in that way, I don't know if she's listening to Kaylin Clark in those situations more than she's listening to maybe, I don't know, Lynn Dunn, or more than she's listening to, you know, others outside or other assistant coaches that have more experience rather than listening to Kaylin Clark. And I'm not saying that Kaylin Clark is right, but what I mean is you need a coach that is able to understand and to be able to figure those things out on their own. And that was what Phil Jackson was able to do. With Gregg Popovich, I just don't know if there's a lot of room for other players to have that type of input. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, maybe not their star players for sure, because really what he does is what's gonna happen. Like if you're in the huddle and we've seen this play millions of times if you follow the San Antonio Spurs. If they were in the huddle on a timeout and he said, do not foul, right? Do not foul. And someone went and fouled against their best judgment, or maybe they thought that was the right thing to do at the moment, he will go off on them. Go off on him. How come like you are dead to him for that day and the next day and maybe a whole week? Because you went against what his specific instructions were. Whereas Phil Jackson will probably let you figure it out on the go. He'll say, all right, MJ, I trust you in that decision. My perspective is that you should not foul in that position, but I'll let you make that decision real time. If you feel like fouling is what it is, then go for it. The difference in empowerment versus direct coaching, and that's what you have. And so now that we've evaluated the two different coaches that we want and that we need to look for if we want them to coach this Indiana Fever, now let's look at our personnel. So if this Indiana Fever team, if their best player was Aaliyah Boston, or if their best player was Lexi Hall, guess which coach or which type of coach I would try to find? I would try to find a Gregg Popovich type of coach, because Aaliyah Boston doesn't appear to have an ego. Lexi Hall does not have an ego. So, and if those are your best players, they have a lot of, they have all the influence in the world, where a coach that allows you to coach them and they have all the input in the world, or the coach has all the input in the world and there's direct, these players are easier for a Gregg Popovich type of player who wants to develop them, no ego, the team first, all of that entire mentality. And I think that's why Gregg Popovich would be more fitting if Aaliyah Boston was the best player on the team. As it happens, Aaliyah Boston is not the best player on the team. That is Caitlin Clark. So things change now if I were to consider which type of coach do I want to bring. And it's not just because, I'm not saying Caitlin Clark has an ego, but Caitlin Clark is a big personality. She's bigger than the Fever. Shit, she's bigger than the WNBA. You need a Phil Jackson. You need a Phil Jackson for this type of team as it's currently constructed, and it's going to be constructed this way as long as you have Caitlin Clark on the team. You need a Phil Jackson type of coach who kind of has the basketball mind, who empowers the players, who manages egos, because maybe I can see some sort of ego situation happening or brewing up with a Nelissa Smith, maybe Kelsey Mitchell, and Caitlin Clark being this huge persona. You need a Phil Jackson to manage that. You need a Phil Jackson to kind of, determine, okay, where am I going to put these individuals in the best situations to succeed? I'm observing this, this works, this doesn't work. And then to bring great basketball minds who can come and help on the basketball aspect of things. And this is not to say that Phil Jackson wasn't a great basketball mind himself, but he brought people that he considered to be smarter than him to develop and to help him with the X's and O's. He had the leadership thing, right? He had the personnel thing. I'm managing you this way. Like if we think back to the Chicago Bulls in the 1990s, that's crazy amount of egos, right? You have MJ again in a similar type of Kalen Clark situation. You have Dennis Rodman. You have Scottie Pippen. You have Tony Kukoc. You have Steve Kerr. You have all these type of players who really needed to be, in a way, left alone, but also they needed to be communicated how they were best going to be effective. So sitting down Dennis Rodman, welcome to the Chicago Bulls. Your job here is not to score. Your job here is to defend and to get rebounds. I don't care if you get 0 points per game. I do not care if you do not ever score the basketball. Your job here is not to score the basketball. Your job here is to defend and get rebounds. Got that? Got that. Great. And then the same conversation with Tony Kukoc. If you want to be a star, this is not for you. This is not the team for you. You're not going to be a star here. Now you were a star in Europe. You're not going to be a star here. Do you understand that? Yep, I understand that. Great. So on and so forth as you go down the line. But you kind of get what I'm trying to say in that a Phil Jackson type of coach is what best fits this specific team. Like and I don't know where you find that. I don't know who that is. But I think this job right now is probably one of the hottest jobs like out there. And not again, it's not vacant, but if it were to be vacant, everybody's gonna want this job. Male, female, everybody, all the coaches in the world, I can guarantee you, are gonna be jumping at the bit to have an opportunity to coach the Indiana Fever and to be part of what Kalen Clark is creating here. Like they're all gonna want to. But you have to do the evaluation and like who do you really want to coach. So now as we take this back to Christie Sides and we evaluate and the things that we understand about her, there's a lot of things that she needs to do to grow. First off, she needs to figure out what kind of coach is she. Is she a Gregg Popovich kind of coach, a developer, her mentor, a talent, someone who develop some sort of talent? Is that who she is? Or is she the Phil Jackson, the one who observes, the one who knows where to put people in the right spots to help them succeed and to communicate, manage egos, and to also understand that maybe she's not the smartest person in the room, that there are other people who are smarter than her, even if they're not more experienced, but it can come from the players, it can come from the video coordinator. That's why I also say that Pat Riley is similar to Phil Jackson, because Pat Riley, when he became the coach of the Miami Heat, his video coordinator was Eric Spoelstra. Eric Spoelstra has certain feedback. Eric Spoelstra has certain input. If this was Gregg Popovich, maybe he wouldn't listen to his video coordinator. And I think Christie Sides is similar, right? I don't think Christie Sides, if the video coordinator is trying to have input and say, hey, this is how I think things are going, I don't know how much weight Christie Sides would put just because of the individual, not the information that they're saying, but, oh, you're a video coordinator. The hell you doing talking? Difference. That's the difference between both Phil Jackson and Pat Riley. Pat Riley saw video coordinator talking and saying some amazing shit. He's like, holy crap, I need this dude as part of my coaching staff. Like, this dude's brilliant. Bring him up. I don't think Christie Sides can do that. I don't think Christie Sides can do either of them. That's the problem, right? And they're not hating. I really want her. I will say this. I really want Christie Sides to succeed. I really do. I want her to figure this out. I want her to figure it out this year so that they can win a championship. But we have to face reality in that she doesn't. I don't know if there's even a percentage of a way that she leans on either coaching direction. She's definitely not Phil Jackson. I mean, we have to get that shit out the way right now, which is what the team needs. She's not Phil Jackson. I just don't think she has the ability, and we see it right now, right? She's struggling with lineups and rotations, so she's struggling to put the right individuals in the right place already. So you already know she can't do that. So now is she a Gregg Popovich? Is she someone who maybe finds diamonds in the rough and who can grow them and develop them? And the answer, as of right now, it's no, right? The only rookie that plays in in the Fever is Caitlin Clark, and also they got rid of Celeste Taylor, who was a great defensive mind. So if this would have been someone like Gregg Popovich, they would have done everything they could to develop her. That's essentially would have happened if Christie Sides was a Gregg Popovich type of coach. But she can't do that. So then what are you? If you're not any of these two coaches, or similar to any of these two coaches, you're not going to win championships. That's just what it comes down to. And maybe, just maybe, Caitlin Clark is so amazing and so good, and this team, it will be so amazing and so good that they can win despite Christie Sides. That, at this point, is what remains to be seen. And we don't know if she can actually get there. But we shall see. Anyways, I know that was a lot to kind of arrive at a crazy conclusion, just evaluating different things and different coaches, and how not every shoe fits in every situation, right? Because that's how most general managers really think. That's how most general managers think. It's like, oh, this person was successful here, they'll be successful in this program as well. No, fuck are you doing? That's not how people work. That's not how leadership works. This is also evident in your offices, right? I mean, a lot of you, I would imagine, have normal jobs just like I do. And I have a leadership position in my organization, and I'm a great leader for certain people, but not for others, right? Not for others. I'm more of a Phil Jackson, I think, self-evaluating. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. But if you give me people that need to be developed and inspired, I don't know if I can do that. But if you give me talented individuals, I can manage those egos and I can place them in the right positions to succeed. That's what I can do. But I'm not here to tell you that I can lead everyone. Oh, I can't lead everyone. I can lead certain people and I can be very successful leading certain people. But there's others that I can't, because it just requires a certain type of skill set that I just don't have. But I've realized that. I know that about myself. I have the self-awareness to know where my struggles lie. So what I would do then, if I was the leader of an organization, was hire someone who I've observed and know that they can develop these people. So if my personnel is people that need to be developed, people that need to be trained, people that need to be coached, people that need to, people need to be on top of them all the time, then I'll hire someone like that to complement my deficiencies. The problem is that you need someone with the brain to know that you lack that. And that's the problem that we have. But anyways, that's the video for today. I'm looking forward to the game tomorrow. Right? Tomorrow, it's Japan here, so it's gonna be tomorrow. I don't know if it's today in the States, but I'm looking forward to the Fever versus Aces, and then I'll do a post-game reaction after that game. And then I will probably do a player spotlight for Temi Fagbenle. That's going to be my next player spotlight. So hopefully you can look forward to that. But yeah, that's it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Give me some feedback if you have it. And I hope you have a great day. And I'll see you next time.